Good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Gilligan, CEO and founder of Marathon Tours and Travel in Boston. And we are delighted to have with us Amby Burfoot, the winner of the 1968 Boston Marathon, who has experienced a long career as a journalist, working for Runner's World. He's written, I believe, about a half dozen books published by Rodale, that was the owner of Runner's World. So good morning, Amby.
Good morning, Tom. It's great to join you.
Amby, you won Boston in 1968. That was really a ripple in the first running boom, but you were still in college, and I believe to this day, you are still the second youngest person ever to win the Boston Marathon, the youngest being Tim Ford, who won in 1906. But you were a senior in college. Can you explain to our audience why someone in college who was probably running maybe track, cross country, started to dedicate themselves to the marathon?
Well, sure, Tom. For me, there's a simple answer to that, and that is that my high school cross country coach was John J. Kelly, the 1957 Boston winner and 8 times in a row national marathon champion, 2-time Olympian, and the greatest inspiration in my life by far. So he was a marathoner. I wanted to be a marathoner. I won my senior year at Wesleyan, correct, but I was running Boston from my freshman year at Wesleyan. So while I didn't match Tim or Tom Ford, I was running it from the age of 18. So I think I was 25th in my first Boston in 1965.
I didn't know that you had run it earlier than that. So did John Kelly give you a training program and think you had the potential to win it?
John Kelly, to my knowledge, never gave anyone a training program. That simply was not his style. He didn't lead or inspire by writing the gospel on paper. He led and inspired me, at least, by his personal example. And that was the way he lived his life. And he lived simply, he lived truthfully. He was a runner. He was an organic gardener in the 1950s when nobody, frankly, knew what organic gardening was. He was anti-big government and especially big military government. He was pro-environment, keeping the world clean and eating simply and naturally. So he was far, far ahead of his time. I was a quiet, shy kid with a little bit of introspection. And so he talked and I listened and I absorbed his lessons. But believe me, he never wrote down a workout in his life.
Interesting. Now, are you a vegetarian?
I've been a vegetarian most of my life. When my kids were around and they left a little bit of the junk food they ate on their plates, I would clean up. And now, like so many, I eat salmon and a few other fish. So I'm not a strict vegetarian, but I'm at least 99%.
And were you partly inspired by John Kelly, who was obviously a vegetarian?
He was an ovo-lacto vegetarian. He did dairy and eggs, and that's what I did for many, many years, probably 30 or 40 years before I added some fish back to the diet.
Yeah. So you being in college training for a marathon, your roommates are equally as famous in college at Wesleyan, Bill Rogers and Jeff Galloway. So tell me about living with the two of them, especially Bill.
Yeah,
who is a good mutual friend of the both of us.
Of course, we can make a little bit of fun of Bill because Bill has that fun side to him. The big influence on my life coming to Wesleyan was that Jeff Galloway was there from Atlanta, and he was a stronger, harder working runner than I had ever known before. He did write down workouts, and every once in a while the workout would say 40 times 400 around the football field grass barefoot, and I did that with him several Octobers, and those were memorable workouts. It's numerically almost impossible, but very fascinating that Bill, Jeff, and I were all at college at the same time at a small liberal arts college that barely had 5 people on the cross country team and was certainly no powerhouse, but it was a place where individual effort was respected and admired. So we fit in somehow, even though we were oddballs. Bill was definitely a different type from me at that point in his life. I came from this fairly strict Germanic background. And as I said, I was shy. I was not an adventurer. I wasn't living life on the edge. I was the only college student during the sex, drugs, and rock and roll era in the 60s who didn't do any sex, drugs, or rock and roll. I just ran. I went to bed at 9:30 at night and got up at 6 for my morning 7 to 9 miler. And Bill was a little bit more adventuresome at that point in his life. You could see his talent, but the dedication was not yet there. And I must admit, it was a complete surprise to me when Bill got his act together in the early 70s and really became disciplined in his training. And then, of course, he went farther and faster than either Jeff or I.
And when you did those 40 quarters, what were your splits?
What were my
Do you remember?
Yeah, the first one was 69.7. That was followed by a 72.3. And would you like me to keep going?
No, I got it.
We
So
averaged
440 a mile pace, somewhere in there.
No, I'm joking. We averaged a rough 75 seconds per quarter. We were just
5-minute mile pace.
Yeah, we were doing marathon training, and Jeff would have had some short interval between them, perhaps 60 seconds or 30 seconds of jogging before we took off again.
Did you have much success at 10,000 meters outdoors?
You know, that kind of stuff didn't exist back when I was running, except that in 1968, of course, it was an Olympic year. So they took us out to some high altitude places in Utah, as it turns out, and you couldn't run fast there. So I don't actually have a real 5,000 or 10,000 meter time to my credit. The single best track race I ever ran in my life was in the old Boston KFC meet, which you will remember, but not a lot of others. And I was in a 2-mile field with about 6 other guys who were all way faster and more Olympian than me. And on the first curve, somebody fell and 2 people went down and they were out of the race. And that left 4 of us. And the other guys were all like 8:42 2-milers. So I had no choice but to chase them around the track for 22 laps or whatever it was. And they all outkicked me, but I ran 8:45 that day. And that's my best track effort ever.
That's impressive. Wow. So you did have some speed.
I didn't have any speed. I got outkicked in every mile race of my life, Tom, and that's why I moved up to the marathon. But I can't say that I was an untalented runner, but I often say to people, how do I measure myself? I was just good enough so that I got to step on the track and race against guys named Jim Ryan and Jerry Lindgren. And let me tell you, running against those 2 guys, you learned where you were on the talent ladder, and they were way ahead of me.
Yeah, but I think from a longevity standpoint, there's few people who can compare to you. The Manchester Road Race is it on Thanksgiving Day or the weekend?
It's Thanksgiving Day. It's Thursday morning every year. I brought my hat here. This is my Manchester hat. They gave me, you can't see it well. They gave me this when it said for my 50th year, and now I've got 57 scratched onto it because I've run Manchester 57 years in a row, which I call my greatest running achievement because you don't do 57 in a row without hobbling a few of those years and being sick a few of those years and being less than your best a few of those years. But as long as I was not going to seriously injure myself or my health, I've been out there every year, and I'm quite proud of that streak.
But as I understand it, a few of those years you were at your best and you claimed victory. How many times?
I can't even remember back then, Tom. I won Manchester 9 times, 7 in a row. And in fact, the Manchester people got so tired of me winning that they started bringing in international runners like John Tracy and the Irish connections from Providence College. And I'm great friends with all those guys. And I appreciate a race that brings in the best runners. And if they're faster than me, so be it. I'll finish second and then third, and now I finished 12,000th or wherever I am in the field, but I'm still out there.
Yeah. Now, Amby, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we first met perhaps when you would come to Boston to visit Bill, and maybe you joined the Greater Boston Track Club for some workouts and some runs. But I believe the first time we ever traveled together was in 1981 to the Stockholm Marathon. And that was the year that they brought in Bill and Dick Beardsley, who had a great duel in 80 in Boston, and they brought them over to help to promote the event. But you also came along, both as a runner and a journalist, to cover it for Runner's World. Is that correct?
I remember more or less what you're just saying, Tom. I'll tell you the funny anecdote that I remember very clearly, and that was you or someone told the airline people that Bill was on the plane, so they upgraded him to first class, and they were going to upgrade me too, but they looked at me and I was wearing tattered Bermuda shorts on the plane, and they said, no shorts in first class, so you stay back where you are, Burfoot. But yeah, that was a great trip, and I've been back to Stockholm for the marathon and have run it several times myself, and it's one of my favorite races and cities. It's just a fantastic place to run.
Well, they have a great running history. Once we did win the Boston Marathon, I think back in the 1930s. But I ran the Stockholm Marathon 8 times in a row from 1980 through 1987. And of course, Bill set the record in 81, and that record stood for quite some time. But let's talk a little bit more about your history as a journalist. You were one of the first writers for Runner's World when the original founder, Bob Anderson, created the publication.
Yeah, I was very, very lucky to be in the right place at the right time. As you and many remember, running was a medium sport until the late 70s, when suddenly everything went straight up. Race participation, the circulation graph in Runner's World's office looked like a rocket taking off overnight. It boomed. Suddenly the West Coast company had a little bit of money. They started to do some freaky West Coast oriented, stories about algae and other stuff. So they needed a serious East Coast guy to add to the staff. And Bob asked me if I would like to join Runner's World. That was at the 1978 Boston Marathon. I had to think about it for about 3 seconds, and then I said yes. And next thing I knew, I was the East Coast editor, and then in the early 80s took over as executive editor. And no one's ever had a more perfect job than I have. No one's ever been more fortunate in their work than I have. It's just an extraordinary blessing that I was able to spend all those years at Runner's World.
Did you study journalism in college?
I was not a journalism student. I would like to say I was a student. I did well in school. Wesleyan was a tough school to get into. And of course, I was a student of the sport of running, which was just as important. And my one rule about journalism, about running journalism, is not that you need a PhD in journalism to write about the sport, but you have to strive to write authentically, and that was my one and remains my single goal in writing about running, to be authentic, to tell what the real experience is like. It doesn't matter if it's Bill Rogers winning the Boston Marathon, or somebody this week I've been writing about guys who are 79 years old and will be running the virtual Boston in 2 weeks, I guess. To write about both of those experiences authentically is the thing that I've tried to do.
Great. And you've recently run Boston.
I ran, yes, I always had the goal of running Boston on the 50th anniversary of my win in 1968. So that meant 2018. And 2018, 50 years afterwards is a long time to wait, but I waited it out. I was running Boston every 5th year, which meant that I ran it in 2013. And of course, that was the year of the bombing. And I was among the group that was stopped at the 25-mile mark, didn't actually get to finish the race. And after that race, we all wanted to run 2014, the comeback celebration race. And after that, I decided, what the hell? I'll just run all of them up to 2018. So I ran 60, I ran 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and spent a year visualizing the glorious finish that I would have in 2018. And of course, it was the worst weather in the history of the Boston Marathon. We all froze and had a miserable day out there. Fortunately, I had 4 or 5 friends running with me, and we took care of each other, kept each other warm, fed each other, picked up garbage from the sidelines to cover ourselves with when we got too cold out there. And it was a different Boston Marathon finish than I had anticipated, but it was glorious and wonderful and full of good stories nonetheless.
Yeah, that was a memorable year. I was in the stands. I ran in 2017, but only to help Catherine Switzer celebrate the 50th anniversary of her first run in 67. So I remember that year when Des Linden won it in a very slow time for the women, but under the circumstances, 2:39 was a phenomenal run for anyone during that year. And of course, Yuki Yamauchi was a surprise victor and one of the classic victories of all times in the Boston Marathon.
Yeah, that was definitely a day for surprises and for those of us in the middle of the pack to just run to finish. And I huddled my little group together at the start and I said, listen, everyone, this isn't a race. It doesn't matter when we finish. This is like a long winter training run. And all we're going to do is stay together and get to the finish. And that's what we did. We had 7 of us, I believe, and all 7 of us finished together, including my friend, my best training partner, his daughter. It was a great experience.
And Amby, where are you now living?
I now live in Mystic, Connecticut, which is actually where I was living during my Boston Marathon winning days. I moved back here from Runner's World 6 years ago. I now run the same courses that I was running in 1968, except it takes me 50% longer to get around them and get back. We're 3 miles from Long Island Sound, so this summer I've been working in the heat. I've been working on my swimming. I've gotten up to 51 minutes of swimming, which is like an ultra marathon to me. And so I'm cross-training and keeping fit in every way I can.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are trying to find some inspiration to keep their fitness levels up. And I know that the virtual Boston is going to be a huge success since it allows people from all over the world to experience this new virtual running concept. But I think everyone wants to get back to the normal or the new normal, as everyone's referring it to. And hopefully, moving ahead to 2021, that will happen. From a travel perspective on our side, there is a huge pent-up demand for all of our trips, and people are locked in to try to finish their goals of running the majors of the 7 continents. And there's a big backlog of people running the more popular events like London, Tokyo, Berlin, all of which are majors. And so we're hoping to get moving again, and we're going to be dependent upon a testing system, which may become part of the new normal for travel. Much like you go through a TSA security checkpoint, there might have to be some type of a testing checkpoint as well once they get that technology in place. So let's look forward to getting back to some travel and seeing each other again. Hopefully that'll happen next April when Boston comes around, because I know You're part of the pilgrimage every year to come to Boston to Mecca. And are you planning to run in 2021?
I haven't made plans to run in 2021. I've got to pick out a good goal for myself, and I'm not exactly sure what that will be. I've had 2 years off from marathoning now. I'm thinking about running a marathon with Jeff Galloway someday because I'd like to experience his run-walk system that gets him through so many marathons. But I want to echo what you just said, Tom. It's so important. Health and wellness is a big part of why all of us are out there. And so, of course, we want to observe and follow whatever health precautions are necessary to get us all back together at some of these races. We are individualists. We are rugged. We can do it on our own. But we don't want to run solo all the time. We want to go back to those big collegial gatherings where everyone shares the road and the energy together. So I hope there will be a Boston next year. I'll be there in the 5K, if not the marathon. And I hope you and many others will bring in big travel groups from around the world.
Yeah, thanks for that, Amby. As we all know, camaraderie is one of the biggest benefits of belonging to our running society, and people who travel with us all come back and say, gee, you know, I went there for an event to run a marathon or a half marathon, but really it was about the camaraderie and meeting people with who shared lifestyles to live a healthy and fit life. And let's hope we can continue to pursue that pretty soon. So Amby, I'll say goodbye for now, and thanks for your time. And hopefully we'll cross paths soon.
Great. Thanks to you, Tom. I hope everyone has a great virtual Boston.